President Obama to lead an international effort to end that war in Syria. Their appeal is even more urgent now that Russia has launched these airstrikes. In a letter signed by some 55 House Democrats, Congressman Jim Himes writes, and I'm quoting, "It is time to devote ourselves to a negotiated peace and work with allies, including surrounding Arab states, that have a vested interest in the security and stability of the region, moving forward with both a peace plan and a coordinated assault against ISIL, or ISIS, as it's also called." Congressman Himes is joining us from Capitol Hill. First, your reaction to the start of Russian airstrikes on various targets in Syria that began today.
Yeah, well, Wolf, you know, it's one more reason why I think there's urgency for the United States to exercise some leadership and really pull everybody together around a table to solve this thing. With Russia now engaged, and of course we've been seeing them move in weapons and personnel for a while now, that's just that much more violence that is going to occur, that much less predictability. You know, we now have all kinds of countries flying in Syria, and so this is just one more reason why it's time for everybody to stand down and realize that we've all got a common interest in an outcome that, you know, may not be one that's to our liking. You know, when Russia and Iran get a vote, and they do in that region, we're not necessarily getting the deal that we would want, but it's a deal that will stop the violence and hopefully stop the flow of now hundreds of thousands of migrants out of Syria and into places like Europe and soon the United States.
Yeah, some 7 million displaced people internally and externally. Maybe 300,000 people have been killed in these 4 years of this civil war that's going on in Syria. In this letter, among other things, you say the situation worsens day to day, shows no sign of improving. You wrote the letter together with your colleagues, all Democrats. Are you losing confidence in the president and his ability to do anything about what's going on?
Well, you know, it's funny. I was listening to Senator McCain earlier. You know, there's a mistake that we make in Washington that a lot of people make, which is to think that if we just get the right answer, if we just do the right things, that everything will be fine in the Middle East. And that's just, you know, couldn't be further from the truth. And I've always felt, this isn't a dawning realization for me, I've always felt that the effort that, you know, has gotten a lot of publicity lately to arm and train Syrian so-called moderates, you know, you don't need to be a, you know, a foreign policy Einstein to know that if you're putting a force into Syria to fight both Assad and ISIS, you know, not only are you fighting on one side of a Middle Eastern civil war, which is probably never a good idea, you're actually fighting on both sides of a civil war. And that's what we're doing. And so I never had much confidence in that. And, you know, sure enough, the results that have become clear in the last couple of weeks suggest that that particular aspect of the policy has not worked. So, yes, it's time to try something different.
So what do you want the president to do in the immediate days and weeks ahead?
I want the president to get together with all of the other countries that have a stake or influence in the region. And yes, that will include Vladimir Putin. You know, people forget that Syria for decades and decades and decades was a client state of the Soviet Union. There is a Russian naval base there. They, like it or not, get a vote. So I want the president to get together with Putin, to get together with Turkey and Jordan, the surrounding countries. Yes, with Iran. That's an uncomfortable thing to say because, of course, that's an appalling regime, but they have influence in the region. To get those folks together to say, to come up with a deal that ultimately will phase Assad out of power and do two things. Describe what the post-Assad Syria looks like, and that's going to be participation by Sunnis and Kurds and others. And then, and this is really critical, once we've done that, we all align, Russians, Iran, the people who are doing it right now, but we all align strategically around eradicating ISIS. Only when we've sort of reached that level of agreement on where we go from here do I think we're going to be really effective at going after ISIS.
One final question. You're a member of the House Intelligence Committee. You're obviously well briefed on what's going on. Russia's intention right now in Syria, a lot of experts say it's simply to bolster Bashar al-Assad, but even further to strengthen its own prestige, its own influence in the region at the expense of the United States. Do you accept that?
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate so far as it goes. But again, remember, Syria has for generations been a Soviet and Russian client state. You know, Assad and his father got their military hardware, their training, and everything else from the Soviet Union and from Russia. So, you know, what we're seeing here is Putin asserting himself, not in areas, you know, where he's sort of breaking new ground, but think of Crimea, which of course does in fact have a long Russian history, asserting himself in areas areas where he can make the case that there's a tradition of Russian participation there. The other thing we need to remember about Putin and Russia, look, as much as I respect Senator McCain, they are not our geostrategic threat right now. They are a problem for us, no question. But let's remember, this is a country whose economy is imploding, whose currency has been tanked, whose president is playing very dangerous games all over the world. And while he is dangerous, we need to remember that we've got a lot of common interest with the guy in terms of fighting Islamic terrorism, doing things like making sure Iran doesn't arrive at a nuclear weapon. So we need to remember that part, too.
Congressman Himes, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Wolf.